Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. This morning, kamikaze drones attacked the Ukrainian capital. Energy infrastructure remains the main target of Russian attacks, but drones are also bombing civilian buildings. As a result of the attack, there was an explosion and a fire in a residential building in the city centre. According to the latest information, 4 people have died and more than a dozen have been injured. Iranian kamikaze Shahid 136 drones were used to attack Kiev. The target of the aggressors was the critical infrastructure related to the energy sector. The enemy's goal is to destroy all Ukrainian infrastructure. They want people to freeze in winter. They want Ukrainians to stay for the winter without electricity, without heating. They want to cause us a humanitarian catastrophe. One of the drones hit an apartment building. 4 people were killed and a dozen were injured. Ukrainian defence neutralised 23 incoming drones thanks to the air defence systems adapted to work after dark. Since late yesterday evening, we have destroyed a total of 37 kamikaze drones. They all came from the south. Our preliminary calculations show that at least 85 to 96% were destroyed by our air defence. This is a pretty good figure, and this number will increase in the future. The goal is not as difficult and not as scary as we thought before. Russia's massive attacks on Ukrainian cities are also expected to exert psychological pressure on the inhabitants. Putin wants to have the same effect as in the frontier cities, where those places subjected to these attacks depopulate. The people there remain really determined. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, appealed to his compatriots to limit the consumption of electricity. Due to the Russian missile attacks in some cities and regions of Ukraine, we have to limit the supply of electricity to keep the entire system stable. But it will be possible to avoid such stabilization blackouts if all of us in Ukraine consciously treat our consumption during the peak hours. This is a small thing for every person's life, but extremely tangible within the entire energy system. For example, this Saturday, residents of the Chernihiv region limited the use of electricity by 20%, and overall in the country on average by 10%. In turn, the last power line in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was disconnected. The reason is another Russian shelling at the substation. The international community has again called upon Russia to demilitarize the plant, withdraw troops and equipment and return all infrastructure to Ukraine's control. Russian terrorists have changed tactics. They are now trying to blackmail Ukraine and the whole world with missile attacks on distant nuclear power stations. Although Ukrainian cities have been the target of Russian attacks since the first hours of the war, there has been an avalanche of new attacks in the last week. Several hundred missiles worth over $1 billion have fallen on Ukrainian infrastructure and civilian buildings. Half of them were shot down. According to the Institute of War Studies, Russia has purchased about 300 kamikaze drones from Iran and ordered several thousand more. The authorities in Tehran deny this. The emerging information that Iran has supplied drones to Russia is politically motivated and disseminated by Western media. We did not deliver weapons to any of the warring parties. Intelligence sources say that the Iranian military is training Russian soldiers to operate drones in the occupied territories of Ukraine. In addition, they directly supervise the conduct of attacks on civilian targets. Whether they got there directly or through intermediaries does not really matter that much. We must be clear. Everyone who supplies Russia with weapons today is jointly responsible for these crimes. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine have reported that since the 24th of February, Russia has lost over 65,000 soldiers, 2,500 tanks, 5,200 armoured vehicles and nearly 1,600 artillery sets in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the foreign ministers of 27 European Union countries at a meeting in Luxembourg agreed to an EU training mission for Ukrainian soldiers. 15,000 soldiers are to be trained, most of them in Poland. In turn, the former Russian president, Dmitry Medvedev, quoted by the AFP agency, threatened that Moscow would sever ties with Israel if Jerusalem were to hand over weapons to Ukraine. We welcome the agreement on the decision establishing military assistance mission for Ukraine. Poland will provide a force headquarters to the mission and offer sets of training packages coordinated with the Ukrainian armed forces. We invite every interested state to join us in the common effort. Polish President Andrzej Duda is visiting Rome, where he is taking part in the Global Food Forum. Russia has committed many crimes and violations of international law in Ukraine. I saw the results with my own eyes, the president said during the inaugural session of the forum.
problemami, z jakimi będzie zmagać się ten szczyt.
The issues the summit will grapple with are the scourge of hunger that threatens the entire world and the food crisis caused by Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Among others, Polish President Andrzej Duda spoke at the official opening ceremony. In his speech, the president mentioned how important agriculture is to the Polish economy, but that was not the main focus of his speech. Russia's actions have significantly exacerbated the growing food crisis worldwide, including the result of the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Russia prevented and then severely restricted the export of food and agricultural products from Ukraine, which, as I mentioned, is one of the world's most important producers of food and agricultural crops, which, as I said, for many decades was and is considered the food granary of the world. According to the World Food Program, Russia's onslaught on Ukraine, also supported by the Belarusian regime, is leading to a serious threat to food security not only for Ukrainians, but for as many as 345 million people in 82 countries. As a result, the number of people suffering from chronic hunger could increase by as many as 47 million worldwide.
25 milionów ludzi w 82 krajach.
The war in Ukraine is not only resulting in security consequences for our region, because those are obvious, but also consequences for whole swaths of the world, which simply by eliminating Ukraine as this major granary of the world, there is a rise in food prices and creates a famine threat. This, of course, threatens an immigration crisis and massive social turmoil. Poland is speaking about this. I am very happy that President Duda came here, because the representation of the countries of the north is unfortunately very small, and here Poland is really the voice of the European Union, the voice of the West. Very often, the president also said in his talks with President Biden that the West and the rich North devote too little time to the countries of Africa, the Caribbean, the Pacific, and in this way we lose the field to Russia, which unfortunately, with its lying propaganda, convinces the societies of many of these countries. Before returning to Poland, tomorrow President Andrzej Duda will meet with the UN Director General for Food and Agriculture. In the afternoon, Andrzej Duda will meet with Italian President Sergio Mattarella. The topic of the two presidents' talks will be the efforts to end the war across Poland's eastern border. From Rome, Aleksander Wojak, TV Republika.
58-year-old economist Ulf Kristersson of the Liberal Conservative Moderate Coalition Party has been elected by the Riksdag Parliament as the new Prime Minister of Sweden. He will lead a right-wing government. I am ready to do whatever I can to create a new, stable and energetic government for all of Sweden and all its citizens. 176 MPs from the Moderate Coalition Party, Christian Democrats and Liberals voted for Kristersson's candidacy. These groups will form a minority government supported in Parliament by the anti-immigrant Swedish Democrats Party. Its representatives are to receive positions in the Prime Minister's office. Tomorrow, Kristersson will present his programme and present the composition of the government and will also be received by the King of Sweden, Charles XVI Gustaf. Kristersson is an experienced politician. He started his career by belonging to the party's youth group and then became its leader. And since 1991, he has been in Parliament a member of the Moderate Coalition Party, with some breaks. The new Prime Minister is considered to be a supporter of neoliberalism. He is the author of the book Non-Working Generation, in which he argued that the Swedish model of the welfare state forces people to be passive. The death toll from the fire that broke out in the Evin prison in Tehran, Iran on Saturday has risen to 8. More than 61 people were injured. The victims died of smoke asphyxiation. The Iranian authorities confine, among others, political prisoners and foreigners in Evin prison, including Shamak Namazi, a US citizen accused of espionage by Tehran. Earlier information about shots and explosions in the prison appeared on social media. It is not known whether these events were related to anti-government protests in the country. The Evin prison holds not only political prisoners, but also demonstrators who have been arrested in recent weeks. Anti-government protests broke out in Iran in mid-September, following the death of Mahsa Amini, aged 22. After the police had apprehended her because of inappropriate head covering, the woman fell into a coma under unclear circumstances and died in hospital. That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us at the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.